All right, week 6 was a bit chaotic. We had yet some more injuries to throw onto the tab, but this week we're going to be targeting pass catchers from week 7, looking at their first read percentages, seeing who's on the uptick, maybe who's on a decline, and we're going to find you some fantasy starters this week.
Woo! Let's get it.
All right, we're starting off with the Atlanta Falcons coming off a great performance on Monday night where they took down the Bills in shocking fashion. They were pretty dominant throughout that entire game, ended up winning by 2 possessions. Drake London was obviously fantastic. I think in games where Darnell Mooney is not playing, he's just going to be pretty much a lock for over 100 yards and have some pretty great performances. They just don't really have that number 2 target as of right now. They play the Niners this week. A banged up defense for sure. Obviously, we saw Fred Warner have that gruesome injury last week. I'm definitely starting Drake London, probably keeping everyone else on the bench for now. I think Darnell Mooney had great stretches of ball last year, but I think we need to see some of those stretches kind of come to fruition in these next few weeks before we're comfortable starting him. Pitts, if you're like deep in tight ends and you need one for this week, maybe you have Kincaid on bye or something. You can maybe give him a rep, but I'm basically just starting Drake.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's 100% the biggest takeaway from the Falcons this week is just that Drake London owners should just be very happy with how it's looking. It's looking pretty vintage meaning last season, Drake London, but definitely good things to come for him and Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. For sure. A good solid week of uptick. The Arizona Cardinals, just kind of gross across the board. I think that Marvin Harrison will probably miss this week. He was ruled out pretty quickly with that concussion. You don't even see him on this read sheet, obviously. Michael Wilson could be a guy that's worth a spot start. They play the Packers, whose defense is great, so it's not a great matchup. I think if they were playing someone pretty porous in the secondary, you could give Michael Wilson a rep, but you're obviously chucking Trey McBride into your lineup. He's as comfortable as you can be with a tight end, and nobody else really warrants any extra info, I think.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. It's just Marvin, Trey McBride, and then now just Trey McBride. But Bears first
This is a
read.
wild chart.
Yeah, it's all over the place, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Poor DJ Moore, man.
Yeah, that sucked. I think he's probably going to be on his way out of town eventually. I just don't think he really fits all that well with this current offense they're trying to run. And Luther Burden's role is kind of going up week by week. Week 6 didn't have a great performance. He was more involved before, but he was able to catch a few passes and get over 40 yards. So the plays where he was involved, he ended up being a pretty valuable add. Rome had a disappointing week, but you still feel good about him going forward. I like him being in that kind of our wide receiver 2 tier going forward. This was kind of just a poor week, but I expect that to change. And yeah, the rest of these guys are all tough starts just because you can see how well they spread the ball. You're throwing Rome into your lineups, but everybody else, I think you're pretty content keeping on the bench. Unless you like need DJ Moore to play and you have guys banged up and stuff, like you could give one of these dudes a spot start, but not the highest confidence right now.
Yeah, I think it could be a fun week to take a shot on a guy like Luther Burden just because they're going up against the Saints, who allowed a bit of, like, I think 3, deep end zone receptions from Drake May and his receivers, Kayshon Boutte. So I think, yeah, Luther Burden with DJ Moore's injury could see a slight uptick or at least a higher first read percentage that's like a bit more akin to his week 3 looks this week. And could maybe even get in the end zone, but I think otherwise spot on.
I like that. Panthers, they're getting Jalen Coker back this week. Everything seems to be trending in that direction, which would be a great wide receiver 2 to throw into the mix. He obviously seemed to have a lot of chemistry with Bryce Young down the stretch last year, so I'm excited to see how they can build on that in year 2 with that connection. But I like Tet, obviously. I think he was a guy that hopefully you bought low on before this week because He was a dude that had a ton of volume and was playing really well. He just hadn't found his way into the end zone yet. Last week, finds his way into the end zone twice, and that hopefully kind of shoots his stock towards the moon. But he's had about as good of a start as you could hope your first round receiver would have as of now. They seem to have a great connection. Bryce Young's comfortable just kind of throwing him jump balls with a smaller corner on him and letting Tet go make a play, which is where he really excels.
I feel like Bryce Young has also been looking a little bit more comfortable, like in the pocket and just passing the last couple of games. Tommy Tremble has seen a big jump in the second half of this first half of the season in first read percentage. So maybe that continues and he becomes a viable fantasy tight end. But like what I'm seeing for Bryce Young and the pass catchers, like which was, last year completely dead offense as far as fantasy value goes. So it's fun to see Tet Hall and those touchdowns, probably the first of several more to come this season, I would imagine.
Yeah, agreed. The Browns. David Njoku was kind of in and out of the game last week. Feels like he's probably going to be out for a week or so. And if he is, Harold Fannin is a tight end that I'm definitely starting. Seems to be a guy that Dylan Gabriel feels comfortable just offloading the ball to. And he's a big target that there's kind of more room for error there. So I think he should dominate some targets this week. Jerry Jeudy, that target share is pretty good. That first read percentage chunk is pretty hefty. So, I mean, I feel like you feel decent. They're playing the Dolphins this week, which is a good matchup. So maybe you can throw Jerry Jeudy in there as a spot flex option or something like that. But I love Fannin this week for sure.
Fannin is an absolute smash play this week. What is the severity of Cedric Tillman's injury again?
He went on IR, so I think he's still out, but I'm not sure if it's like lingering past when he's eligible to come back or anything like that. He obviously got hurt in week 4, so I think he is guaranteed 2 more weeks out.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I think that's my only idea for this Browns passing or receiving core is a Fannin smash week. So let's move on.
Whoa. Obviously less spread around than normal, which makes sense when you have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Flacco seemed capable of getting these guys the ball. He obviously forced Jamar a ton of targets. T. Higgins could be an interesting one. Didn't have a great week, but hopefully they can build upon that. I think we might see a situation, though, where Flacco's just so comfortable throwing the ball to Jamar in any situation that he's the guy that really succeeds and thrives. Obviously, I mean, he's the best receiver going. So I think his target share is going to be dominant every week, and you feel a lot better if you're a Jamar Chase owner with Joe Flacco at the helm than you did with Jake Browning. So he's obviously been elevated back up to that top of the wide receiver 1 tier.
Yeah, totally. Going up against a Steelers defense that's pretty stout this week. But I still think just considering how intentional Flacco was with targeting his guys that we're seeing like no action with Browning. I think those guys should 100% be added to your starting lineups despite that. But yeah, probably better things to come for this receiving unit for the Bengals with Mr. Flacco who can actually pass unlike Browning.
Agreed. Packers. I feel good starting Matthew Golden pretty much going forward now, especially if you're in deeper leagues and stuff. But he finally had that week that people have been hoping he would get. Still didn't score a touchdown last week, but was very much involved in the offense and was kind of the first read when they needed a big chunk play. Had a few super long plays down the field and a couple like crossing routes that he turned into bigger plays on his own. Finally looking like the guy a lot of people drafted in rookie drafts or in redraft were high on the stock for sure. He was a kind of late riser after the draft. So I like Matthew Golden a lot going forward. Romeo Doubs is probably a guy I'm comfortable throwing in if you need a flex or a spot start or something, but he's kind of just going to be a somewhat high floor. And if he scores touchdowns and stuff like he's capable of, he can have huge weeks, but it just doesn't spark like elite confidence.
Are you worried about Tucker at all for Tucker Craft owners?
No, I think it'll always kind of be relevant. I do think like as Matthew Golden's role expands and things like that, like there's less targets to go around, but he's still like a big target that Jordan Love feels comfortable throwing the ball to consistently and especially around the red zone. So
Yeah, I'm interested to see how they look against the Cardinals this weekend because they've lost some games that they should win now. So, like, I'm curious to see how good this Packers team actually is.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, but I think you're spot on with the Golden
I think they'll have some bigger
optimism.
tests coming up. I mean, they play the Cardinals this week, which isn't anything crazy, but wins against the Bengals and the loss against the Browns and things like that are just a little bit shaky for sure. The Broncos, super gross game in London last week. Hopefully they can get some sort of bounce back against the Giants. Weird to be playing a game in London and then not having your bye. That's kind of a brutal travel schedule. So we'll see how they adjust with that. But that game in London, I think you can just kind of throw away the tape. It was super sloppy, terrible game, just not a lot to really like look forward to. So I think you kind of just revert back to what was successful for them in week 5. And that was a lot of Cortland Sutton. Evan Ingram's role is kind of slowly upticked, which is nice to see if you bought high on him in the draft. And
Could
then
have also been just like an effect of them being in London, don't you
true,
think? Though, yeah.
true. So yeah, I mean, you're still probably not like locking him into your lineups, but a guy to think about. And then Troy Franklin's just going to be kind of a deeper stash type of player.
Yeah, totally. I think of this receiving core, the only guy I'm really thinking about starting this week is Cortland Suetonius.
Agreed. Completely agree. The Houston
Texans.
Texans, who were on bye last week, they have a somewhat fun game against the Seahawks on Monday night. It's a 10 o'clock Eastern start time, so you might not want to get involved with too many pieces in this one. It's going to be a tough game for people on the East Coast to really follow along with, but Nico's obviously going to your lineup, and I think you can ignore everyone else for now.
Yep, totally agree. I mean, just look at that everyone else target share that's been insanely consistent throughout the season. There's no consistency here in this receiving core. It's going to be hard to like trust anybody besides Nico any week. So
The Colts, they seem to change up their first reads and everything as much as anyone in the NFL. I mean, it's pretty much down to these 3 guys, but you can see some guys have bigger weeks pretty much across the board. I guess that's mainly in the Josh Downs, Michael Pittman department. Tyler Warren's been pretty consistently around that same chunk throughout the entire year. Seems to be about a 25% target share type guy every week, more or less. And he's been elite for rookie tight end. They're playing the Chargers this week, who have been on a bit of a spiral with their injuries and things like that. But what should be a fun game, Tyler Warren's a must-start guy in all formats right now. And kind of take your pick between Michael Pittman and Josh Downs. There doesn't ever seem to be a ton of rhyme or reason why one succeeds on a certain week compared to the other, but I think you can feel okay about starting either of these guys as a flex if you're in a 3-flex league or something where you need more options.
yeah, totally. I feel like Josh Downs is still on, or like maybe until like the touchdown last game, but like was on people's waivers.
For sure.
So definitely an ad. Jags, who are they playing this week? They're playing the Rams.
Yep. I mean, like potential for a decently high-scoring game. BTJ had his best week of the season in week 6. I think you feel pretty good about that going forward. You just kind of wanted to see some signs of life from him, and he was able to show some of those against what is a pretty good secondary as well. He had 8 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown. So he's back in that wide receiver 2 conversation after 2 pretty strong weeks in a row. He's going in your lineup, obviously. The rest of these guys I can pretty much do without.
Yeah, totally. I don't think I'm starting.
Especially with Brenton Strange out.
Yeah. Brenton Strange was looking like he was going to have some upside there until the unfortunate injury with this offense. But I think Trevor Lawrence is looking pretty inspired, so BTJ should be fun the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I totally agree. Chiefs. I mean, this one has obviously always looked weird on this chart, but you can pretty much scrap this entire sheet and just throw Rashee Rice into your lineup. Reports this morning were that the Chiefs are going to get Rashee Rice involved as much as possible from the get-go. I think there were some concerns that he might be on a snap count of some sort, but that doesn't appear to be the case. Xavier Worthy, you could still throw in as a flex. He's going to be a deep play threat, and I think his role will become more solidified to running some of those big chunk plays now that you have your main over the middle receiver that you trust back in the fray.
If you have any ability to trade away Hollywood Brown after that huge week last week,
yeah,
do so.
yeah. Depending on the IQ of your league mates, that could be a fun trade that you can accomplish. But Rashee's going into your lineup if you stash him all year, like regardless of where you're at, he's going in. So start him.
If you can't make that magical trade, you're probably dropping the likes of Hollywood Brown and Tyquan Thornton for the rest of the season. It's just going to be super inconsistent.
I think Xavier Worthy still has a pretty strong role in my eyes. I think a lot of those kind of like short slant routes and things that have been going to Travis Kelce thus far, some of those will go to Rashee Rice. So I feel a tad worse about Travis Kelce than I even did prior. So mainly just all in on Rashee going forward. Excited to watch him.
Yeah.
The Rams. So I think Davante Adams should be in wide receiver 1 conversations this week. No Puka playing the Jaguars like we talked about, whose defense have been pretty good, but this feels like a smash Davante Adams spot with Puka likely out. I mean, Puka's a dog. You never know. He could find his way back on the field this week, but even if he's playing, you're starting him. And if he doesn't play, you're just going to start Davante Adams either way. I think it would just determine whether he's like a flex option or he's like a dominant wide receiver 1, but should be a huge Davante week ahead. And then I think you can look at some of those secondary guys. Jordan Whittington seemed to be the guy that had the biggest uptick in week 6, kind of the guy that catches some of those intermediate routes that Puka is accustomed to seeing. So I think if he misses, Jordan Whittington is a guy that you could give a spot start to if you need a flex.
Yeah, totally. Is Puka officially questionable?
Yeah, I think that's his status right now.
Damn, yeah, because I feel like, I mean, for Davante, you would almost rather Puka play and get limited action than not play, because I feel like with like Davante, he gets targeted in the red zone so much. He gets targeted more than anybody else in the red zone. Like Puka and those deep passes aren't really going to take away from his production. Just like that's just another piece on the field for the Jaguars defense to guard. So either way, it should just be an Adams super high volume smash week. Like I don't have much to add besides that.
Yeah, no, I agree. Didn't practice today, so it's not like trending in the greatest direction, but I guess we'll see as things get closer. The Chargers. Ladd McConkey had a much better game with QJ out of the fray last week. I'll do a quick search on Quentin Johnston's status, but I think as long as he's out, you can kind of just put those targets more in a concentrated area to Ladd and Keenan. Both guys have a lot of upside. I think Quentin Johnston is trying to log some sort of practice today, so definitely keep an eye on that. But all 3 of these guys are probably still starting this week. It's just a tough one. I think if you're a Ladd owner, you felt a lot better about his role with QJ out. So, it's always going to be tough to pick between these guys, which one's going to have the huge week. Quentin Johnston's obviously had the best start to the season so far, but that could switch at any moment. So feel best about Ladd this week, even with QJ back, slightly banged up. And then maybe Keenan gets a little bit of that leftover target share and is kind of the one left out going forward. But Ladd week, hopefully can build on that.
Yeah, Ladd passed the eye test last week. He was doing nice, like after the catch and stuff. And honestly, Oronde Gadsden took up 50% of the target share this week. It's like I don't think QJ is coming back is gonna worsen anything at all for him. Like if anything, he got more of a target share with QJ or first read percentage. Yeah. Sorry, not target share. But yeah.
Heading on to the Raiders, they play the Chiefs this week. I mean, should be a good matchup for game script. Just should be throwing the ball a ton. Seems like Brock Bowers going to be out a decently extended period of time. So Michael Mayer scored a touchdown last week. He's a tight end you can throw into your lineup in a bind. Jacoby, I would have thought would have had great weeks with Brock out. So far, that hasn't really been the case. Trey Tucker had a nice little game last week. You can see that first read percentage is huge. Again, a guy that's going to be super boomer bust. So you could throw Trey Tucker in your lineup if you're looking for like a guy with a super high ceiling against a Chiefs defense that can definitely give up some big plays. So keep an eye on that. But I don't know if we have anyone super fantasy relevant this week. I mean, you're still probably throwing Jacoby Myers into your flex if he's a guy you drafted, but the last 2 weeks haven't inspired a ton of confidence.
Yeah, I think it's like, outside of fantasy, I think it might be a fun like buy low moment for pick and props for Jacoby, just because of the poor performance without Bowers, but game script should call for a lot of passing from Gino, who, unless he shits the bed like he's been doing, should at least land a couple to those guys. Yeah.
Moving forward to your Dolphins, what did you see last week?
That was a fun game. Got the Darren Waller touchdown. Unfortunately, lost that one. Jalen Waddle had over 100 receiving yards, which is exactly what you want to see with Tyreek Hill out. Jalen Waddle infiltrating that wide receiver one role. Malik Washington got some looks last week too. Probably would like to see a little bit more targeting of him in the future, which I think is probably likely. But I do love the volume that Darren Waller's been eating up, which was lower than I thought it would be last week. But I think he should just be a mainstay in this offense. He's looked so good, scored multiple weeks in a row. So, I mean, I think you're honestly, outside of Tyreek Hill owners, like you're pretty happy with the way these pass catchers are looking right now, and Tua's actually feeding them the ball. So I think they're going to be fantasy viable next week against this Browns team who absolutely crushes the run. And Achane is super explosive, but I mean, it's just a big ask to lean on the rush super heavily against this Browns defense. So I think there should be plenty of Darren Waller volume. I think you definitely start him if you were one of the people that picked him up off waivers to replace whoever you needed to replace. I think it's a great week to just throw him back in the lineup. Waddle should be viable again. Otherwise, you're not starting Malik Washington or anything like that yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. The Patriots, Diggs had a tad of a down week, but I think he's established enough confidence that you can be fine throwing him in those flex spots going forward. They play the Titans this week. Should be a pretty favorable matchup for them. Maybe not in game script, so the running backs might be guys you look towards more, but Kayshon Boutte had that giant week, which is going to be hard to ever replicate. Maybe you add him and just kind of keep an eye on him and see how things go, but I wouldn't really be starting him this week. Diggs can be a solid flex. Hunter Henry obviously had a great start to the season. I think right now you're probably operating with a little bit of caution for now, but we shall see as things go forward.
Yeah, I agree. You're starting Diggs, you're starting Henry. Like the Titans have a pretty all right secondary, so shouldn't be anything crazy. I loved how Drake May looked last game, though. I do think there's going to be some passing touchdowns here.
Yeah, he was great. The New York Giants taking on the Broncos. Tough matchup cornerback wise. It's hard to really see who's going to get the Patrick Surtain matchup. I don't think it'll be Wandale just because he operates mostly out of the slot. So I'm starting Wandale, and then it's just too hard to get cute with the rest of these names. I'm probably going to be staying off of everyone else.
Wells is really big on Lil Jordan Humphrey this week for what it's worth. So
I picked him up in a dynasty league, so we'll see how that goes. But he might get the PS2 matchup, which would be a death sentence for Lil Jordan.
Yeah, totally. You think he would over like Wandale or Slayton?
I mean, if Slayton plays, I think he's an option for it. Wandale's kind of mainly a slot guy, and I don't see PS2 like operating in the nickel and kind of tracking him everywhere. So it's going to be one of those outside guys. So I guess it would either be Lil Jordan or like a Slayton if he plays. I guess Jalen Hyatt or something, but that would just be kind of a waste of coverage. But I mean, you never know. I would feel decent starting Wandale. I think he kind of has to go in your lineup after a big week last week. So
Yeah, I agree.
the Saints, give me Olave.
Yeah.
Maybe even spot start some Taysom Hill. But outside of that, I'm pretty content staying off of everyone else. Rashid Shaheed's gonna be a super boomer bust guy, as we've seen throughout his career. I'm fine staying off him unless you just want to take a high upside swing like we talked about with Trey Tucker, and you need some like uh, high ceiling guys. You have enough floor, and you're looking for that role in your flex. Jawan Johnson's role is decreased like crazy over the past few weeks. Kind of probably due to Taysom Hill playing a lot of snaps there and just kind of being used as the Swiss Army knife we're used to seeing. So give me Olave in the flex. Fine staying off the rest.
Yeah, I mean, Olave is a must start each week. He draws second most targets in the league behind Puka, going up against a Bears defense that has just been getting cooked pretty much by receivers. I know they're at least in the bottom 10 teams in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers this season. So should be another great Olave game, not starting any of those other guys.
The Pittsburgh Steelers. Darnell Washington had an interesting little uptick for a sec there in last week's game. I saw a couple people were talking about potentially giving him an ad in like dynasty formats and super deep leagues and things like that. But I'm starting DK for sure. He's established himself as the clear number one option in this offense. And then everyone else, I mean, potential for big games, but like I'm not going to be upset if I have them on my bench or I didn't add them and they have a big week just because they're so volatile and hard to predict.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Do you know the status of Calvin Austin this week by any chance?
No. Is he a
Okay.
guy you like if he plays?
Yeah, he should be pretty good, I think. Also, I mean, Jalen Warren should be huge this week, but
Mm-hmm.
like
It's
from
just
a
tough to predict
receiving
with him and
standpoint.
Gainwell and everything, but I think
Oh, I
if
just meant
he
from
is.
pass catching standpoint.
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. But otherwise, yeah, I agree with what you mentioned.
The Jets, Garrett Wilson seemingly will miss a game or two, it would appear. I think a lot of that target share probably just gets forced to Mason Taylor, but
Mm-hmm.
their offense has been so gross uh, in the pass catching department. I mean, it's been bad all around, but you just can't trust a quarterback that only threw for 45 yards in a game to really like have much relevance for his pass catchers. So Mason Taylor, I think, might just draw a ton of targets. So for volume alone, you might want to throw him in there, but I don't want pieces in this offense, really.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, Philly. Oh, do you have something to add for the last lad?
Oh no, I didn't have anything important. I was just gonna re-emphasize Mason Taylor smash week. Philly, who are they playing? They play the Vikings.
Yeah. Obviously, a team that mixes up a ton of looks, has a very creative defense, sends the house a lot. Will send blitzers from the outside, from corner, from nickel, from pretty much everywhere. They do a good job of keeping the quarterback uncomfortable. Eagles' offense hasn't looked good either. So, in theory, this should be a matchup where the Vikings are able to just kind of confuse the whole entire Eagles' offense. But I think the Eagles are probably going to be looking inward a lot and really trying to figure out what makes this offense run as best as it can. And I expect some things to look different after a little mini bye playing last Thursday. So, I mean, I feel decent about having A.J. Brown in this game. I think Jalen Hurts is probably going to get the ball out quickly, which would then lead to some Devontae Smith catches over the middle and things like that. I
Same with
think
the
this game
Goater.
has potential to have some points. So I would. You're probably still starting AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. You're not feeling great just based on the seasons they've had, but I think they got to go in the lineup. And then Goddard had a gigantic week last week. I think he was at 26 fantasy points. Played super well. I think he had 100 receiving yards. So if you have him on your team, he's going into your lineup unless you have one of those like top 3 type tight ends. So that's
I
my
agree.
takeaway.
Yeah. Throw Dallas Goddard in your lineup for sure. I mean, plenty of evidence from last week that he should see a pretty large share of the reads. Like what Grant mentioned with Devontae Smith, should be a lot of getting the pass out early, intermediate routes. So that should favor him as well.
The Niners. I mean, it's hard to say with kind of their injury problems. Jawan Jennings playing on like 6 broken ribs, 2 different ankle sprains in each ankle and everything. So I'm fading that. George Kittle appears to be back this week. So I'm putting him into my lineup. Should be a complete alpha play at the tight end position. Definitely a top 2 tight end for me this week. And then if Ricky comes back, you're starting him. But if outside of that, I mean, Kendrick Bourne has developed a little bit of a role. I think if Ricky's still out and Jawan Jennings is on this same type of weird snap count, injured but playing situation, they're going to need to throw the ball to more than just George Kittle. So you could use Kendrick Bourne as a flex probably again. But if Ricky's playing, I'm off of Kendrick, I think.
Yeah, this Falcons secondary has looked pretty decent too.
Yeah, it
So
has.
I agree with you.
Tampa Bay. Emeka obviously going to be out for an extended period of time. Chris Godwin dealing with injuries. Mike Evans, I think the status is still kind of up in the air, but I mean, if he plays, you're definitely going to start him into your lineup just because of the relationship he has with Baker and how confident you feel with Mike Evans just kind of as a guy at this point in his career. He's been Mr. Consistent for years and years now. So if he comes back, I think you're fine throwing him into your lineup. They're hoping he can practice this week, so I would kind of just keep an eye on it as the week goes on. But outside of him, the deeper shot that I think I like the most is going to be Cameron Johnson. I think he's the guy that most fits the profile of Emeka and will be getting a lot of those kind of crossing routes and over the middle type targets. Tez Johnson is obviously viable for a huge play, but last week he had 1 catch. It just was a 45-yard touchdown, so that kind of boosted up his stats. I think he'll be more involved in the offense, and they might get him some like kind of end around plays just to get him the ball and see what happens. But I think Cameron Johnson's a more reliable floor guy. It just kind of depends on what you need.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say I know whether or not it's going to be Sterling, Tez, or Cam, but I mean, what I can say is Baker looked really good slinging the ball without his normal options. So I think someone should be good next week, and it's a fun like group of players to take a swing on for like a splash touchdown at some point.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And game script calls for it.
Tennessee.
Sorry, game script calls for it too with this Lions matchup. Like great rush.
Yeah,
defense.
it should be points and points and points. I would be shocked if it wasn't the highest total of the week. It's at 52.5.
Commanders is right.
We have the Cowboys game at 55.5. Yeah, so moving on to the Titans, Calvin Ridley got banged up last week, and Ellick and Chig received huge target shares. They play the Patriots this week, who have been a pretty solid defense. I think like tight end premium with 3 flexes or something, you could probably throw Chig in there if Calvin Ridley doesn't play. But outside of that, I don't want pieces from this offense to just look too out of sync.
Yep, I'm totally with you. I'm good there against Gonzalez and the Patriots secondary and stuff.
For sure. Commanders. So we touched on this being the highest total of the week. Zach Ertz kind of had a return to form after a 0-point performance in week 5. Feel good about throwing him into the lineup. Terry's still been out. I think he's been like close enough to play, or it's been kind of a late enough decision that I feel like he probably finds his way back onto the field this week. But if he's out, Debo's obviously going into your lineup, even with Terry in there. I think Debo's a great flex option. Feel good about Ertz in a game that should have a ton of points. I think you could get a touchdown from all 3 of these guys, but I think more reliably, Debo and Zach Ertz are going to be those kind of red zone from 7 yards out type targets that you want to have in your lineup. So I'm starting kind of as many pieces as you can from this game. Those would be the 2 pass catchers that I like the most, and then you'll see us talk about running backs in a sec.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's like you don't really get a better matchup than this for your pass catchers. So, I mean, if you have pretty much any piece in this receiving core, I think you're starting it this week and you're doing so pretty confidently.
Agreed. Seahawks. Give me JSN. Don't need anything else. This chart is ridiculous. Over 50% first read percentage. Had an unreal week and has quickly elevated himself to what I believe is a top 5 wide receiver in football right now.
Cooper did get into the end zone for the first time, though.
He did. So, I mean, I don't expect this game to have a ton of points. I think if it was like a really high scoring matchup, you could start Cup or an AJ Barner just because there's going to be touchdowns to go around. But the Texans defense is really solid. Their secondary is really good. It's not the greatest matchup even for JSN, but he's been so good this year. You're not going to keep him out of wide receiver 1 slot. So he's going into your lineup, but not a great matchup in this game. I'm kind of comfortable being hesitant on the rest of the pass catchers.
Agree.
Minnesota had a bye last week. This week they take on the Eagles. Eagles secondary has been solid, but they've also given up some big games like we saw to Wandale. Justin Jefferson kind of fits that type of profile the best, I guess. He's obviously a different tier of guy, but he's comfortable operating out of the slot at times and catching some of those short plays that he can then turn into bigger ones. Jordan Addison, I've liked his role thus far, but he's seemingly going to be like a deep play threat. Last week, he did score a touchdown, or their last game, he scored the game-winning touchdown towards the end. So it's nice to see that relationship there a little bit. And then Hawk, he's just kind of a meh play. Like, if you need a tight end or whatever, he could probably do a job. He's going to have big weeks where you regret not starting him, but like it's too hard to predict with him, in my opinion. But I think Jordan Addison is kind of the upper tier of that boomer bust flex we've talked about with a Rashid Shaheed and a Trey Tucker. This is like them in their final form, a guy who's a little bit more solidified as that player and a little bit more well-rounded and a really good route runner. So I'd feel fine checking him into your flex, and then Jetta's obviously going into your lineup every single week.
Yeah, pretty much agree with you. It's weird that we aren't really seeing like the same crushing rush defense from the Eagles that we're accustomed to. So, like Addison, just because of that factor, I'm a little bit more hesitant to start this week, just because of how relatively bad
pound the rock.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But otherwise, I totally agree with everything.
Lions, Laporta's been awesome the last couple weeks. You feel really good coming into a game that should have a ton of points on Monday night. He could be your savior that kind of digs you out of a hole and you win your matchup because of that. Amon-Ra is going to your lineup every single week. Didn't have the greatest of performances last week, but I think you still feel good about him going forward. Obviously, he's a wide receiver 1 in fantasy every single week. And J-Mo is going to be boomer bust like he always is. This feels like a fun game for J-Mo because I feel like the Buccaneers have given up a lot of big plays in the last few weeks, and J-Mo feels like the best guy equipped for that. So if you need a flex, and he's a fun guy that you could easily have score 20 points on a Monday and win you your fantasy matchup. So I'm bullish on all three of these guys this week.
Yeah, totally. I think it should be a shootout. And it's like Laporta, you can't rely on Laporta to get a touchdown every single week, but I think a large share of that first read percentage does come in the red zone. So, hopefully that just builds more confidence for him, inspires more looks for Laporta. Like, I think it should be pretty safe start.
Yeah, agreed. I'd want pieces in this game. So
yeah,
get me involved with whoever that may be. And then I think our last one, we have the Dallas Cowboys. CD Lamb seems like a return could be imminent for him. Keep an eye on practice reports, and you might want to even check your lineup before games start on that early Sunday. But I think CD, I would lean on him probably playing. He got like a pretty limited practice in, and they seem to be willing to let him get a run in this game, even if he's not like 100%. So I think I'm throwing him into my lineup. Obviously, if he's playing, he's going into your lineup. But I still feel good about Pickens and probably even Jake Ferguson. I think games that the Cowboys play in are just always going to be high scoring for the foreseeable future. So give me CD, give me Pickens, and then Ferguson's obviously going to your lineup as well. So kind of like what we talked about with the Lions, I just want pieces involved in the Cowboys offense because they tend to just play high scoring games that turn chaotic quickly.
Totally. I just agree. All these are smash pieces this week. It's the highest scoring game script of the entire slate. Like, it's going to be a huge game for all of these guys.
And that is the last team in our first read percentage list here. And that's going to do it for this pass catching segment of our Week 7 preview. You'll see us tomorrow where we tier some running backs and talk about great matchups there. There's a lot to go around. but hopefully you found some flex options, some tight ends on waivers, some wide receivers you can throw into your lineup. And let's try to get to 7-0 this week for any of my undefeated viewers out there. Everyone else, let's just get a dub. Hopefully this advice helped you, and we'll see you next time. Peace.